We're live. Welcome back, everybody, to the Choices, Chances, Changes show with Georgie Dickins and myself, Kit Tran, where we explore the transformative power of personal and professional decisions. Now, we're very lucky today to have my buddy, partner in crime on a lot of things, John Olesky, the co-founder and CEO of Leonard West. John, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. The term partner in crime is leads to a lot of things, but certainly longtime friend at the very least.
No, exactly.
You know, when you said partner in crime, I'm like, there's some stories here. I'm sure probably not ones for the podcast, but
yeah, they may not fit this podcast, right?
That's right. Uh, John, one of the things we always love to start with, we talk about choices, chances, and changes that individuals make, whether it's personally, professionally, to get them here today. And I think your story is quite interesting because, from my understanding, you started in the pharmaceutical healthcare technology industry, right? So how do you start from that to being in fintech?
Wow, that's deep cuts going way back. I think at the time that I finished grad school, which was 2003, it was very difficult to get a job directly in finance. I wanted to work in finance. I was an engineer at the time. So the first mission was just to get to New York. And, the first job that I could get, or the first job that called, was actually Thomson before Thomson Reuters, in their pharmaceutical space. And so I took the first job I could get. I had to do a reverse commute from Manhattan out to New Jersey, which was difficult at the time. The train stations and the junction right outside the city did not exist, so it was buses. But I knew that I had to kind of just bide my time until I could, get a job in finance. And ultimately, what happened was my manager there at Thomson moved to FIS. And once he was at FIS, he said, "Come over here," and that's how I made my way into finance and into lending.
Curious to rewind a little bit. Pre you starting in health tech. What was your first ever paid job? So probably even pre-university.
Oh man, I think you can pick one of two. I was a soccer referee when I was in my early teens.
Okay.
But around that same time, we had a local pizzeria that would give us free pizza and like $1.50 an hour if we distributed flyers on people's homes for the pizzeria. So, I mean, those are probably the first two ways in which I made money as a teen.
I imagine the soccer referee there's so many lessons there about the importance of feedback. I don't know. I often think the referee is you've got to learn how to give good feedback. You've got to learn how to deal with confrontation. I imagine there's many lessons that have served you quite well.
Oh, I mean, it's well, especially because when you do that, you're also dealing with things people really care about and emotions. So the biggest conflicts I had in that job were the parents of the children who played on the teams. Any call that didn't go their way, or God forbid their child, does a foul, performs a foul that is worthy of a card, and you have to bring out a yellow card or something. I mean, it goes pretty crazy. So you learn very early how to deal with a lot of people who are showing a lot of emotion. So, I sometimes get accused of kind of keeping the emotion in, but a lot of times it's because I see people lose control once they get very emotional, and I don't like to do that. But it's funny, I hadn't even thought about it until you just asked the question. I imagine that early experience has served me well over the years unknowingly.
And emotions, it's so interesting. Emotions show up everywhere in our personal lives, in our professional lives. How do you deal with people when they lose control, or people are emotional?
I don't mirror the energy. So I think you could ask anybody on my team, and especially those who are prone to more emotional outbursts, that I don't find any value in someone getting excited, overly angry or excited or into something and mirroring it with the same thing back. I think that's just pouring gasoline on the fire. So I try to keep it calm, and usually usually that quells it enough to where we're having a conversation. And then I can express even if I disagree or if I don't appreciate things, but it can't be in the moment in which there's a flare up. So I also don't like showing emotion on everything, because if everything is exciting, then nothing is exciting. And so you have to save those moments of praise, of pure joy, of pure excitement, so that they happen naturally, but they just can't happen at everything, right? Not everything is a disaster. Not everything is amazing, right? Save those for the truly disastrous and truly amazing moments. And I think then people really understand when you express something that it's genuine, right? That it's real in that moment.
Kiet, what's coming up for you in terms of, I know you know John incredibly well. There's, again, a lot of stories there that we'll maybe hearing today, but I'd love to hear what comes up for you in terms of John and, the business is growing.
No, I think it's interesting how, the subconscious, the unknown, like not being aware of the skill sets you build early in life and the experience you have that collectively gets you to where you are, right? I do wonder, John, when you were at FIS or when you were at Market, building, running product and businesses, like how different was that to now building a business on your own?
So I think my perspective on that has changed and continues to change. But what I tell people is that working on top of a platform like a big company where you have support structures, so you have your help desk, you have your legal, you have your marketing, you have your different folks that provide those things upon which you are, luckily allowed to run a business or develop a product. You take those things for granted and you assume, oh, well, I was an innovative person and I got to speak at these conferences and I got to build successful products or run businesses. This is a tiny little thing compared to those things that I used to do. And then you do them and you're like, wow, I couldn't have been more wrong. I mean, there are way more things that are different than are the same or similar to the job I used to do before. So what I tell people who are kind of very established in corporate, really great corporate jobs is you have to do this understanding that it's going to be terrible for a while. And terrible is not just like what you see in movies about struggling and sleeping on a couch somewhere. No, terrible could be you don't have the control you used to have. You don't have the support structure you used to have. You have to rewire your brain to accepting that if I don't do something, it may not get done. And I think that's difficult for people once they reach their late 30s, their 40s, maybe even beyond, to kind of go back to that, because it's not just about effort. A lot of these folks work really hard in their jobs, but it's a different type of work. It's a different type of effort. So, Kiet, I know a lot about you. You're a serial entrepreneur. This was not something that I grew up around. And I have no entrepreneurs really in my family. Some of my friends do it, but I don't. So when I took this leap, it was mostly to prove if everything that I thought about myself, my ability to build product, my ability to build teams, my ability to work with my great co-founder, Josh, like, are these things that I could actually do, or have I just been talking about these things for a long time while being comfortable inside of a very large company? And that was a big part of this. And Kiet, we've talked about this a lot because you've gone through this journey too. But I think that's the important thing I would say to people is you got to know it's going to be bad. But what I tell myself, I have a little trick, if you'll indulge me. When bad things happen or difficult times come, I usually imagine myself 20 years in the future. This is not prepared, by the way. We didn't talk about this, but you guys don't. I don't know that you know this about me, but I imagine that I'm giving like a Lifetime Achievement Award speech wherever. It doesn't even matter where it is. Made up organization that thinks I've had a great career. And I imagine if the story is more interesting or less interesting, if there were things that were difficult that I could talk about in that speech. So all of a sudden, the thing that was really terrible or difficult or struggle or the thing that I stressed out, I'm like, oh, this will just make a better story later. And I know it's not not necessarily true, but you can convince yourself or trick yourself. You can use devices to like motivate yourself and move beyond it. And it's actually helped me when things have been tough. I'm like, oh, it'll just make for the story. It has to be difficult. This is a difficult journey. Small percentage of people make this. It's all good. This is normal. And once difficult things become normal, they just don't matter anymore. Now you just overcome them like anything else.
Sorry, just a quick one, because the one perspective I don't think people talk enough about was, you ran ClearPaw, you ran a big business and a big platform, right? You speak at industry events, so everyone was like, John, and then the second you left, you're written off to be a nobody, and you're starting from zero. Like that emotional experience. You want to talk a bit about that, because I think that's a mindset.
Yeah,
I think it'll be helpful for the audience to listen to.
I think it was healthy. I don't know if it was. So I know you guys know Brad Levy. Brad was my manager for a good while. I owe a lot to him. But I think he was one who told me. I think it's important to remind people that signature block under your name, that logo, like that's not you. You are an agent of that company. You are a representative of that company. And so I already kind of said that in my mind, that once I left, I no longer had that cachet. But you don't believe it completely. You're like, nah, but still people kind of knew me, right? They'll still remember. And they do. But yeah, not everybody's taking your call as quickly. Not everybody is responding to the email every time, certainly right after you leave. What I found interesting were the people who would respond and didn't realize I had left. I just mark it at the time, like, oh, you're doing something else, which is kind of funny. But yeah, I think it's important. And this is where you talk about personal brand. Your personal brand is you. You have to build it up. Now you do that as part of a company. So there's that symbiotic relationship of being a good performer, a good representative of the company, a good agent for the things that the company is trying to achieve. But you also have to understand that there will be a moment tomorrow, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, where that logo is not next to your name anymore. So what does it mean then? And, I had some people who at least planted those seeds in me before I'd even considered leaving the company and doing something different. So I'm appreciative to that, because I think it would have been even a bigger shock.
And you talk about that entrepreneurial journey. You mentioned there that you said a little while ago that, the word struggles, there's struggles, there's stresses, there's setbacks. And I'm curious around what has been the most rewarding part of building a business?
I suppose that should have been an obvious question, but I didn't really give that a ton of thought. A lot of things I would say, I think, may come off as cliches, but I do believe them and I do say them. People do business with people, not with software or data. And I don't know, maybe there's a future in which you're not doing that, but I think up until now you do. And so the human element has been the most difficult and the most rewarding. Early on, and this is true of, I think, a lot of startups, but you bring on the first handful of people you bring on are all impressive, high performance, experienced people who know their path to success in their previous roles. Now, people have had different paths to success, but like, oh, maybe I was good in building something this way, or this is how I developed a team to perform this way, or whatever. But those paths are often different. And so now you get these like successful people in a room trying to decide a singular direction for one entity. And everybody knows, and they believe that they know how to succeed. They know how to do this thing, but so do the other people. So how do you arrive at a common mission? I think those are things that are really difficult early on, and they manifest themselves in micro moments. It could be a small decision about something you do. It could be a branding thing. It could be a product thing. Or it could be something really big, like, the way that our company is going to operate and support customers and build software. But, the most satisfying thing is kind of starting from a lot of those moments of conflict to arriving to a place where it's way more common for people to align immediately because they've learned each other's experiences and how to respect them. And it doesn't mean you don't respect early on. It just means that your experiences carry so much more weight when you've been successful than that of other people. So we talk about people all the time in our company. It's the number one thing by far, way ahead of product or service or clients. No offense to our great clients, but like, if we're not working well and we're not in harmony, we can't deliver good products and services to you.
So it's people-led. Lance talks about this, people-led, and in terms that that there's the what's been the most rewarding part. I'm wondering what no one warned you about, because there's lots of textbooks you can read, and you mentioned Brad. He's an incredible. He's been an incredible advisor and mentor to me in the past, and there's always things you're like, no one ever told me that. What's one thing that has, blindsided you, surprised you?
I don't know about one thing. I think I can give you my overall journey surprise, but I can also give you my individual as CEO surprise. No one prepared me for how lonely it is. Mm-hmm. And Kiet and I have talked about this before, but once I started feeling that way, I would search on the internet just to see if it was, and I found that it's a common thing. And perhaps you're an expert in this space, so I imagine it's not a unique answer, but you put those couple letters in your signature block, and you now know you don't have the safety net. I don't have the Brads or the Lances or the people who have been mentors to me in the past. It's just on you, and it's lonely. And it doesn't matter if you, it's not about having great people around you and speaking a lot. It's just not that. It's this other feeling. And I can't really put it into words, but it's something that I've discussed with other leaders, and it's common. It's a common feeling, but no one prepared me for that. Because when I led businesses at IHS Markit and other places, it never felt like that. I had a great co-head of a business at IHS Markit. I loved working with her. It was never lonely as a leader. Starting your entrepreneurial journey, and it can be lonely as a CEO. Now, as far as the thing that no one prepared me for, was the dynamics of fundraising. I don't think you've ever had to do that in any other walk of life unless you literally work in raising capital or you do a startup. And the reason I bring that up as a surprise is not because it's a surprise that we had to raise money, of course, but we've raised it in a few different flavors with a wide spectrum of people we spoke to. And I don't believe in a spray and pray approach. I don't believe that it's that whole, it was that 101st meeting that really did it. I don't believe that. I believe in listening to what's being said. I believe in finding those common threads between target investors. But no one, I think, prepared me for the obvious, which is how things can change direction very quickly. How interest is a moment in time, and you have to capitalize, and interest can go away. And it's not always you. It's not always your product. It's not always the value. It can be seen. It just doesn't fit in that exact moment. So you very quickly learn about those dynamics, and then it becomes kind of fun and easy. But at the beginning, you're kind of you're on this you're on thin ice, so to speak, and you kind of don't want to misstep because you're afraid that so much rides on every decision and every moment that you do as an early entrepreneur. And then quickly you realize that there are very few things that are the sky is falling, the company's going under. There are very few things like that. But early on, you're so worried about every decision that's perceived as big, later on to realize there were really only a couple that were big. And that I started learning that through the fundraise process, and then that carried into being a leader in the company. But there have been very few decisions, percentage-wise, that have really been, this could be the end of the company type thing if we make the wrong decision. There's been like 2. But when you first start a company, you think everything is a big decision.
You mentioned the loneliness piece. That comes up so much in the work that I do. And one leader said, I've never been surrounded by more people. Like, I am not alone. There's a board, there's an executive team, there's my directs. and yet I've never felt so lonely. So it's this, there are lots of people, but there are very few outlets. Well, to your point, mentor sponsors, you're at the top. So, and it's still important to have a trusted tribe of people where sometimes you just want to vent, let off steam. And at times you do need advice. I think when you're in the weeds or in the doing, it's not, we don't necessarily have the same level of perspective, which others, if we were advising others, we'd be able to give them that perspective. But when it's us and we're in it, it can be difficult.
Yeah, I have to, I mean, the education, we talk all the time about how, having worked at Market and then IHS Market, I can't speak to the S&P experience because I'm not there and I wasn't there for that. But it was, I didn't realize it when I joined it. I was kind of young. I think I was 33 at the time. I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know much about the company. I didn't realize that it was this really unique, incredible mix of talent that came together and built so many interesting things. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if my first couple of jobs were my, undergraduate degree, working at Market and IHS Market were my master's and my PhD, it was a collection of people who really knew how to move things forward. And most importantly, I can only speak to my experience, but people gave time to me. At every level and every job I had, people gave time to me even before I may have deserved to know about something, a topic, or be in a room. I mean, I look back and I'm like, what was your experience like when I speak to other folks? And it wasn't like mine, usually. Maybe Kiet's, but like other people who didn't work at IHS Market, it wasn't like that. And they said, oh, I never got exposed to that, or my manager never talked to me about that, or I never got to see that. And then I look back and I'm like, what a privilege it was for people to entrust me and bring me along. And it's so much of what I am today. So I still keep all that network. Like, most of the people who I valued and who mentored me there, I still speak to. And I'm okay with this idea of bringing, I don't think I'm generally, the most humble person in the world, but I bring humility to those conversations. Because there's still things that I can, either they can be a sounding board or they can give me insight that they never did before, right? It's not like it's a finite set of things. So I'm eternally grateful for that experience. And that's ultimately what helped me develop my network of support, the ones I still tap onto today. Obviously there's more, but the foundation are folks that I worked with there.
No, I mean, the amazing thing is, look, this is not an IHS Market podcast, but the reality is there's over 300 CEOs in the industry that were, from that collective pool team of individuals that we were all working together. So it's definitely an amazing journey. I do want to touch on a bit on the technical aspect of the business, right? I mean, John, you and I have seen the growth of the leveraged loan market and how that's evolved into private credit, private lending. Like what do you see the industry heading towards, and what's so key about what LendOS is doing that everyone should realize and understand?
Yeah, I think the genesis or the origin story of our company was actually pretty simple, and it's not necessarily just something that is evident in the corporate debt or syndicated loan or private credit direct lending market. It exists in others as well, but essentially we've reached almost a breaking point where the solutions offered to banks and asset managers and trustees and other market participants in order to run their businesses, they've been insufficient for a long time. But with the growth, certainly of the private credit market and eclipsing leverage lending, something's got to give. I mean, we have processing times in systems that are heavily delayed, so that means there's an inaccuracy from a reporting standpoint, from a tracking standpoint. We have tons of breaks everywhere. We have transactions that take way too long to settle. We have an inaccessible way or inconsistent way of interpreting and processing the same activities for the exact same asset class. And so ultimately, what can you do? if the existing solutions are insufficient and they don't evolve fast enough and they just can't, either structurally or because of their legacy code, well, the only option is, I mean, certainly people could build their own solution, but a lot of financial firms have struggled to be software shops. It's difficult, right? Or it's to offer another option, another choice. And hopefully some people will think that your choice is a better choice. And over time, if you earn it, people will think that your choice is the best choice. There's no silver bullet for that. You can't accelerate time in high scale enterprise software. You just can't. So you have to earn it, and you have to build upon that first one, that second one, that third one. You need to put in the time, you need to put in the detail, especially because a lot of times the solutions that you're deploying, you can't deploy at a 30% or 40% of what's expected. You have to be at a pretty high percentage. But I think when you think of that, you could think of saying, oh, is it just that the right software is missing? I think that would be a piece of it. But in reality, we're missing the right technologies as well. So in a world that, we talk a lot about paradigms on how you build solutions, and you have the concept of a centralized solution. So that's like, okay, you put up an application on the web and different parties come together to do something, to share data, to interact, to transact, to get something. Whatever, that's a hub and spoke model, right? That's been tried and true for a lot of different solutions, but it carries a lot of baggage. It creates heavy dependencies on the providers, which is something people don't really like right now, especially with the incumbents. It creates a certain power dynamic that's very difficult. And so this isn't unique to our asset class. Again, this is a universal concept in the provisioning of services. But we've been talking about this opportunity to allow for parties to transact with each other more directly, so in a more distributed way. People talk about disintermediation. I don't really like using that term so much because I think that service providers have a role to play in a distributed model. And they should onboard that network in the same way that participants do and offer a service in that way. What I'm talking about is a structural difference in the ability to scale and participate in an ecosystem that allows people to interact directly when appropriate, which, by the way, happens all the time, but there are no rails for this today. But then secondarily, that doesn't eliminate or doesn't remove every single service provider, because quite frankly, you need those service providers and they offer really good value. I just think some of the things that exist today don't need to exist or can't exist. If you're going to move things forward, they have to be broken and rebuilt in a different way. And so we use distributed ledger technology. Our good friends at Digital Asset, Yuval is a longtime friend and colleague. And, we use their DAML framework for our smart contracts. We use their Canton ledger for communication. Really popular right now. It's going through a really awesome growth period and with the support from a lot of institutions. We were early. And I think that some of these choices, again, not only on the tech, but also on the people that you want to work with and the trust we have in them, really affords us an opportunity to be different. And Georgie, I don't know if you use the term escape velocity ever, or if that comes up with other leaders, but we are constantly thinking about how we're building something or how we're approaching an area where there's a battlefield, where there's no one to fight, where we're the only ones there. I think the way we've built our software, which is from the ground up, using these mechanisms, using these technologies, where we model data differently, we architect our solutions differently. We're built not only for scale, but we're built for hyper connectivity with other parties around the world, both inside your organization and outside. So we feel that we put all the time into building the way we do. And we're right now in a pocket where there's no one else who actually has built anything remotely similar to what we do. And so we're achieving escape velocity on structure and on the promise of what we're doing. And a lot of people are really interested in that. They're really interested in the fact that we built differently and we're built for a different future than a lot of the other folks who are building in a more traditional software way.
That is a new term for me, escape velocity. Is that what you said, right? Escape velocity?
I may have lifted that. I think that may be a Peter Thiel term from years ago. But the way we use it is to say, have we built something, or are we on a journey where we're unique, where we've delivered something or we're approaching something where there's not really other people who are playing in that same space. And the idea is that if you're constantly in a moment or a position of escape velocity in what you're building, then essentially you're not competing with anyone. You're unique, and that uniqueness should carry over into success for the company.
I love that. And listening to you, it's such an exciting time to be in this market. And we talked before we came online, that you've got a distributed team, people at different geographies. And I think one of the challenges, I am going to use the word challenges, that leaders experience today is how you motivate people different, very geographically dispersed. How do you think about that in terms of how you the culture you're building within your company?
Yeah, this is one, certainly Josh and I talk about this all the time, and members of the exec as well. You can't recreate like regular human interaction. You can't recreate that. I think people always used to say, even before COVID and before like the norm became working remotely, you'd still have lots of colleagues around the world, and you'd interact with them on, Teams or Slack or Zoom, or before that, other tools. And then all of a sudden, like, there would be a visit, right? And that colleague from the other side of the world would come to your office for 2 weeks, and you get to sit next to him. You get to go out and maybe grab a drink or dinner. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, these 2 weeks you were here were like 2 years remote. Like, I believe that. I believe like that the interaction with people in person is, in that case, I don't know what the right multiple is, but it's a big one. And so, but how can you do that as a startup? Can you really afford office space? Are you going to coincidentally hire talent in one location? Maybe. But I think more times than not, you have to take advantage of the tools that you have, which is remote work, and also hiring the best people you can. And they may not be in the same location as everyone else. So motivation can be difficult. I think you have to hire the right types of leaders, first of all, that really care about their teams and are going to be in regular contact. I think the biggest killer in a startup is periods of non-communication. Going a day or two without speaking to a direct report, not acceptable at all, right? Going that same period of time not speaking to a manager, not acceptable. Going that period of time without at least poking in or checking in on a chat, or interacting with something that person has done work-wise. We're a pretty transparent organization, so everything any of the teams is doing is in Teams, it's in different channels, it's tagged, people have access to it. So I think the way you motivate people, is being in regular contact. We are still humans. People do business with people, not software, right? And internally you build software with people. Sure, you have tools like certain AI tools, and I'm sure that's what Kiet was thinking. But in the end, I think I think motivation is a contact sport, and a high contact. And the more you're interacting with the people and communicating, obviously there's different tools. You can always use financial motivators and rewarding and things like that. But I think ultimately, if you want to keep people really engaged, people motivated, it has to be high contact, very high contact, in a remote team especially.
I love what you said there. I haven't heard it referred to. Well, again, you've just given me a different terminology or language around using it, but the contact sport. And as I listen to you, it isn't that everyone needs to be in the same location, because hiring the best people means it is going to be kind of distributed, and then there's no excuses for not having regular touch points, whether that's on message, whether that's picking up the phone, but it's having that, keeping those connections.
And look, like, working remotely allows you to kind of hide sometimes, right? You can just not chat people, put your head down, not call anyone. And, that's okay. Some days you have to put your heads down. You have to work, right? That's the truth. It's especially true for engineers, right? Sometimes they just need peace and quiet, their headphones, and they need to work. But I think, that can't be 2 days or 3 days or 4 days. That's a killer. that's a killer for a remote organization. So the more you have to, now you can't just be pinging someone, annoying them every day. So let's take that extreme away. But, I think people want to know that others are thinking about them, or thinking about what they're working on, or need them, have questions for them. Like, we all need each other at different moments. So I think the more you develop that kind of web of reliability or reliance, I think that's where you start getting into, oh, I'm not just my job. I'm actually a valuable person at this company, and I have other ideas and other experiences, and this person cares about this or asks me about that. And we have a lot of people at our company that know a lot about a lot. So you could absolutely have a conversation, very eclectic group. I don't know if we'll be the same thing when we're at 100, but now that we're, in the high 20s, I think we can still say we're a collection of eclectic people.
How do you make hiring decisions? I'm curious.
Well, that changes too. I think when you have like 3 people at the company, like you talk amongst those 3 people. Now, I must admit, I have to let go a little bit of my OCD or my need. People are getting hired without even meeting me, and that's totally okay, right? I mean, I don't have to, interview every single person at the company, especially for roles that I don't directly oversee on a day-to-day basis. But you have to develop an agreement on the things that matter for the company. So for me, it's interesting. Like, my perspective changed quite a bit from an early manager to an experienced manager. At first, I just thought you hired the smartest people, and that's it, period, full stop. I need the most talented, smartest people, highest IQ. That's what I need to hire. And then eventually I had quite a few of those turn into problems for the team, not necessarily for their intelligence, but for other things, but sometimes for, but you can find super highly intelligent people who are also nice, but you have to filter out the nice first. You have to have people who want to work with other people. This is something that we talk about all the time. What a shame when someone is a superstar, but no one can stand them. What a shame. Yeah. Like, wow, just a little bit of effort, being a little bit nice. I mean, you're the next Elon Musk, professionally. But I think what's interesting the thing that's really interesting about what we've done is, I think even before proclaiming that or making that a thing, which we have communicated that, I think most people's natural instinct in our company, just fortuitously, was to hire, people that people want to work with as the first quality. And then also of course, verifying the bona fides, right? Like, you still want to make sure that they are an elite level talent, but you filter out the people you want to work with first. Then you verify the talent.
It's when you talked about the superstar, don't hire the superstar that no one can stand. I think it's when companies can get it wrong, it's where they hire purely on competence and capability and not thinking about that cultural fit. Because to your point, the cultural, if they're no one can stand, or if they're the jerk genius, they bring toxicity into the organization, they could be extraordinary. But if they're cancerous, it's not going to be, we think about the importance of culture, it's not going to be great for culture.
Yeah, and the reason it matters, and let me just qualify it a little bit more. I think the people on our team, we have a lot of elite level talents in our company, like, truly. And I don't say that, just for the sake of saying it. We have them. But I think when you're a startup and you're trying to fill a role, you are trying to accelerate that time as much as possible. You're already behind the 8 ball. You're already moving too slow. You got to get these guys in the door. So the easiest thing you could do as a hiring manager is just find someone, oh my God, they're super, get them in the door. Instead of saying, hold on, like, are they a fit? Because when you're a small company, the wrong person can break your company or break a team. So that acceleration, or that 2 weeks or 2 months you save finding the right person, it's not worth it. I find. And so this is where I say you filter out the good people first. You still find the elite talent, to be clear, but you have patience, a little bit of patience with it. You don't take 2 years to hire someone, obviously, extremes aside. But I think in the startup space, I see people hiring people, boom, one conversation, really easy, good vibe, this or that. Oh man, you should see what they built, and they're a 5Xer, 10Xer. I'm like, but are they going to fit? Like, how much time would you talk about? Oh, no. And then, sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes it literally is a team killer. So you filter out the people you want to work with first, then you vet the superstar talent.
Yeah, I love that.
But do you value experience, or do you value more potential? Like you think about like in the early stage, right?
You should have my CTO on the call for that one. It's hard because you want to have a dynamic group of people at different stages in their career. You want that.
Yeah.
Right. You want the really experienced people to mentor the mid and early stage, and you want the early stage people to be able to do enough and own enough to show value, but they haven't got the time yet. So, you have to trust them. And so, you give trust first, and then you take it away. You don't make them earn it. I don't believe in that. You give trust from the beginning. But what I find really interesting is that when you have 2 or 3 people on the team, can you really afford like the early stage folks? I don't know, maybe not, right? You only have a couple spots to fill. You need self-starters, you need wearing multiple hats. And one thing I learned, so when I was in my 20s, I thought I was a superstar, hot, talent, this or that. And then I realized that without the experience, it didn't mean as much as I thought. I'd never been in the room. I'd never negotiated anything. I'd never led teams. I'd never done those things. And all of a sudden, like, you know what? I respect experience a little bit more. It took me a while. So you can hire these young prodigies with a lot of runway, but you can't only hire them. You need some people to balance. You need some people who have been there before. And by the way, that model works in almost everything in the world. I mean, you take successful sports teams. You have the young talents with the veteran players. Like it's common that you can find that balance. But we early on, a lot of our people have a good amount of experience. Small team, and now we're diversifying a little bit more. But mostly because if you only have a few people, you need people who can wear a lot of hats and who've done a lot of things.
I have a question around craziness, because there's many books I've read on entrepreneurs, and some of them, when you look at transformative leaders, people who are revolutionizing, who are such visionaries and change makers, there can be this fine line between what some refer to as brilliance and others might call like that founder madness. And I was wondering if you identify with that founder madness, in yourself.
I think if you ask people at the firm, they'd probably say I have a little crazy in me. Kiet nodding. I think that I'll tell you what makes me go and do certain things that maybe others would think is too much or too far, or whatever. It's I believe that you have to be all in for this to work. Mm-hmm. And so the things that may seem a little crazy or a little manic or a little excessive or a little OCD, they surely are. But they're not on an island. They're not just something that manifests itself just because it does. Like there's a catalyst, and the catalyst is the fear that if I don't do this thing, or if we don't get this out right now versus tomorrow, or if we don't, deliver this one thing, or if this is not up to certain quality, that it'll be insufficient to succeed. Like it's true. I learned this. This wasn't always my nature. I learned this through experience. That extra hour earlier delivering something, that extra level of detail on a presentation, that extra thank you note, that extra delivery of something they expected in 2 days and you deliver it a day or two early. Like all those things factor in. I could surely wake up the next day and do the work, and so could any person on our team. But I always push and say, what about that extra thing? What if we built it tonight? What if we delivered that thing tomorrow? What if there was an extra little detail, something they didn't expect? And that only comes from elbow grease. That only comes from work. This is not a talent thing. This is not a planning thing. This is an effort thing. And so sometimes the effort that, or the things that I do, surely can come across a little bit unnecessary or crazy, but I can assure you, those are the things that separate, a vendor that clients call partners and not vendors.
And I don't call it founder math. I call it founder OCD. It's funny, I'm not, because John has a great level. Like my wife's amazing, so talented, and it's because of her OCD that gets us to a level that I haven't seen anywhere in that drive for perfection. And you see that in founders where they believe they see it and they have the OCD of raising the floor, right, and raising the standards around them. That to me is amazing, and that's one of the great traits about John from that perspective.
Thank you, buddy.
Well, John, Kiet and I like to do a quick fire round. We didn't give you these questions in advance, so it's not a competition. There's no right or wrong. It's just whatever comes up when you hear the questions. And we're going to go, first of all, a leader you admire, and then I'm going to add a second piece here, and why.
You should have shared these in advance. Yeah, I don't know. I think I wouldn't go in business. I would, I don't know, I'd maybe say my father.
Oh, okay.
Why? Because he got on with it. Life doesn't always deliver the good path, so difficult times, just got on with it. And I think that when you're an entrepreneur, like I've said, and it maybe sounds terrible. So everyone out there who wants to be an entrepreneur, it's a great journey. Do it, but just go eyes wide open. Not everything's terrible, but I think you define leadership when things aren't going well. I think it's really easy to be a leader when you're crushing it. Today's going to be an easy day for me, right? We just announced some amazing things. Like today's going to be an easy day as a leader, but there are more days that aren't difficult. And my dad just got on with it.
That.
Well,
your favorite? I feel the energy behind that. I'm sure he's very proud. Your favorite superhero?
That's changed over time. I'm going to give you two. I think my favorite superhero growing up was Superman, but that's from the 80s, so that's a long time ago. But I thought my coolest superhero was always Thor.
Chris Hemsworth.
I don't, this is pre-Chris Hemsworth. He's great.
But he was a pretty good Thor, though. I think he did a good job.
He's a great Thor. I don't know. There was something about that roguish, son of the King of Gods, right? Of the God of Gods. There was something about him and the way he was pretty human as well. So, yeah, I was always a fan. But when I grew up, I grew up on military bases. My dad was in the military. And so comic books were in every Saturday type of thing. At the time, you pretty much only had like Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man were the only three things that I think I would have found, maybe growing up in Turkey or Spain or wherever else, we were stationed. But Superman was always the number one. And then I think as I became a teen or a little bit older, I think Thor was kind of cool, and so he took over.
Okay, well, I go Thor, Chris Hemsworth, so mine's all for the wrong reasons. Okay, two more here. A quality you most value in others?
Wow, there's so many good qualities. I'd like to say honesty, but I'd say I'd say truth. And that truth is not just statements that are true, but kind of being themselves, people that aren't afraid to just be themselves. So I think their truth matters a lot. And the percentage of people like that is actually kind of low in my experience.
And last one thing you can't work without.
I was going to say my large monitor. Now I think if I do this in seriously, I can't work without people rowing in the same direction. I struggle when one person on the team or two are not bought in or are doing things that aren't the most important thing right now. So one thing we've kind of started doing is asking each other if we're in sync. So at the end of a conversation, or if this is something new, we just started talking about this, is to kind of make sure that we don't cross wires, or we know that the right objectives or the next steps or what the mission is. It's kind of asking each other, okay, are we in sync, and kind of recapping very quickly. And that's an attempt at always rowing in the same direction, always understanding exactly what's next, what's the highest priority. There are 30 different things that anybody at this company could have on their plate at any time or more. So are you doing them in the order that best suits the company? Well, it's tough. Are we all going to prioritize the hundreds of things everybody's working on? It's very difficult. So at the very least, in the layers that work with each other, you should make sure you're validating whether or not you're in sync with what's important and what's next.
I love that. Well, look, John, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the Choices, Chances and Changes show. I will pass over to Kiet to close out. But the biggest thing, I've made many notes. I will be sharing those with our audience, some of the key lessons. So thank you for your candor, and thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, that's my pleasure. Thank you.
No, and thank you, Georgie, for an amazing co-host as always. And John, congratulations again on the Series A. And to the audience, we want to continue to thank you for your continued support. We keep going because of your continued support. If there is a guest that you would like to be on, please recommend, let us know. We are actually talking to a lot of potential guests at the moment as well. A lot of amazing individuals that I think the world needs to hear, especially around their journey to leadership. So more to come. Thank you, everyone, and have a good week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.